Well, today on Rethink Real Estate, we've got Jerylann Mateo. Jerylann is a listing agent with Compass who had a successful auction campaign with us in San Jose, more specifically Curtis Avenue. This was a listing that was on the marketplace previously listed for around 90 days as a traditional listing. We converted it over to auction and we take you through the case study of what happened all the way through and Jerylann's overall experience of that process as an agent, that when you have a listing on the marketplace for a period of time and you're talking to your sellers about a price reduction, you may have already even done one. This is an insight to how the transition of taking the property through to an auction can really change the light and really bring success into the equation. Hope it's helpful. Hopefully it gives you a better insight to the auction process. Thanks so much. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, Jerylann, welcome to Rethink Real Estate.
Thank you, Ben. Nice to see you.
One of the first things I had to get correct was, remember when we first introduced you and I called you and we were talking about Curtis, your listing. I think I nailed your name the first time around, which I was very happy with myself. I'm not a big name guy. I'm not very good at it. But Jerylann, I love that name. I think it's such a great name. It's such an individual name.
Yes, my mother made it up, so definitely probably will never hear it again.
Well, so Callista, who is my better half, Callista gets she gets that all of the time. Her name gets like, oh, I've never heard that name before.
Right.
And it's I like individual names, but when they get a little bit weird, like they have gotten sometimes, like Apple and all these different things.
Yeah, that's very different.
That's right. Well, hey, it's great to have you on the podcast today. And obviously you're joining us because of one of the really successful auction results that we had. But I wanted to kick this podcast off by just getting a little bit more information on you and who you are and how long you've been in real estate and things along those lines. Obviously, San Jose, California is where you're based out of. You're working for Compass. You're certainly, it's funny, as I've gotten to know you and then a few other agents locally mentioning your name, they definitely know who you are. So a little bit of a celebrity in the real estate world.
Well, thank you. I have been in the business for a long time. I've been in the business over 20 years, so I do know a lot of the agents. I do a fair amount of business. I've been able to get into the top realtor list, so always very proud of that accomplishment. And I grew up in the area and have worked in the area so long, so it's been a really nice piece to my business to grow.
Well, I haven't seen that a lot. I haven't seen a lot of San Jose agents grow up in San Jose. Is that what you're saying? You grew up in San Jose?
So San Jose area, but so my office is in Los Altos and I grew up in Mountain View. And so I have been married for many years. I married my high school sweetheart. And so my last name being Mateo, there were a lot of Mateos going through the school system here in Mountain View. So it was, getting into the business, like I said, over 20 years ago, it was really nice that a lot of people coming into open houses, they knew some of my family or people that went to school with my family. So I had a lot of, I think, just really nice interaction with people that, again, helped get clients and grow my business.
The thing that I'm really curious about, Jerylann, is that you are, like, when I say you are proper Silicon Valley. Like, you are in the depths of it. You are like in the area where Google, Facebook, all of these places are, and you've seen then the full development of Silicon Valley to its fullest level back in the heyday, and possibly in the days now where it might not be as, I don't know, known as the tech center of the world. I still think it is. There's no question, but with remote work, I'd love to get your views of the evolution from where you saw it growing up all the way through to now and what progression that it's taken.
Right. Well, so growing up, there were a lot of fields around. So I grew up in a time where, as kids, we could go out and play in those fields and run around and be outside until it was dark, then come home for dinner. And then as things started progressing, we had companies starting to come in. We had Silicon Graphics come in, and just some of the bigger companies started coming in and into Mountain View.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing some pretty amazing things, I feel, in Mountain View, and helped change some of our school systems. And then, of course, when Google came, that changed a lot. I think they've done wonderful things for our city. I think they've helped a lot of not just the schools, but other companies. And our city as a whole is very well run. And so now it's very different. And, there's a lot of people who don't like that change, but I think it's been a good change.
Yeah.
There's, of course, a lot of housing. I think that that's been the biggest thing, especially having companies like Google and Facebook and um, all the big companies that have come into the area.
Yeah.
Is that we have had such a shortage of housing, and so we don't have a lot of land to build on. So there were a lot of people selling, their apartment buildings to developers to start developing some of these housing units, 15 and 20 units, which has been kind of fun to be involved in some of those.
I just think it's one of the most amazing things if you were to take into consideration the volume of real estate that there is on the peninsula, so to speak, all the way down to San Jose. But
Mhm.
then you were to look at the average sale price in that valley there, like it's one of those things like if you looked at the average sale prices in those marketplaces from, call it 25 years ago to now, it's just absolutely exploded. But have you felt like you've been part of what I would say is one of the fastest moving marketplaces of the last, call it, 10, 15 years in North America? There's no doubt about that. Just
Absolutely.
based on the technology money, people thought that COVID was crazy. That was nothing in comparison to the way the Bay Area always really was in those particular marketplaces.
Mhm.
But let's talk about have you seen that change over the last couple of years, or is it still the same?
Well, the market is still good. I mean, we definitely have had some changes in the market where we're not seeing, say as much over in the list price or as many offers, but we are still seeing a lot of listings come on and get multiple offers, but sell at, a much more reasonable price over list instead of, an outrageous number that nobody could ever guess, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, we've started seeing some change in the market, but I think because we are in such a good area and we do have low inventory, I think that has continued to keep our market really strong.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, like the news media, when they're reporting lower sales, they're not really reporting it correctly. People are thinking, oh, the Bay Area is falling apart and there's not, they're not selling. Well, no, it's just that sellers are not selling. So we just don't have as much inventory. So
Yeah.
I think we'll remain strong.
I think that like when people talk to me about the Bay Area, like some people are either enamored by it, like, oh my God, that's an amazing place. It's so amazing with all the tech stuff. Others, they've got a hatred for it. They're like, oh, though, like, I hope that it falls on its face, like it needs to, and all this type of stuff. And it's like, it's kind of, I think that the infrastructure of the companies that are there at the moment, the Apples, Facebooks, Googles, these big companies, Adobe, all of these massive companies that ultimately are in that space, there's enough infrastructure now that they're not going anywhere fast, that the
Right.
Bay Area is always going to see that, or that the peninsula down to San Jose is always going to see that affluent community, that really fast moving real estate market. But you're seeing a little bit more remote work now. However, that said, I know I dealt with somebody only a week or so ago now that's moving back to the Bay Area because their job's being called back to the office
Right.
itself. Have you seen any of that happening recently?
We have. And in fact, some of those bigger companies like Google and Facebook have required their employees to come back into the office. And it might be for 2 or 3 days a week, but it is hard for people that moved away and were so remote to come in just for a couple of days. So people are having to move back into the area. And
Yeah.
that is not only good for our market, right? As it's also good for the rental market
Yeah.
because, they did tend to move out of rentals and move away so that they could get something bigger. Now they're coming back. So
Yeah.
I think that it's been a little slower for the companies because they've been announcing that they're doing this. And then there was some pushback from the employees, but they are now starting to come back in.
It's funny, the person I was speaking to actually that actually is in this situation at the moment, they moved to Colorado, to Denver, because
Mm,
they could do remote work. They obviously money goes a lot further for them. They moved out of the Bay Area, they sold their house, and now coming back in, they're kind of like, well, the market's actually gone up a little bit more. And it was actually technically, and Colorado and Denver specifically has gone down, right, in
mhm.
those luxury price points. They're like, this was the worst real estate decision that we could have ever made, is moving
Right,
away from our job.
right.
Yeah.
And
So
that's the hard part. So many people did that thinking that it was fine for them to move away and not get the approval. If they didn't have the approval from that company, then they are required to come back. So,
the other funny part is that even people with approval, like things change. Like they get approved by their boss, but their boss leaves or they've been removed or
true.
whatever it may be, and it changes. But
Right.
either way, I think that there's something to be said also though, Jerylann, about yourself being in real estate for as long as you have in that marketplace. I would go as far as to say it's one of the, when I think about real estate and I think about competitive real estate, I think about the coast of Southern California. I absolutely think about Silicon Valley. I don't think about all parts of the Bay Area, but I think
Mhm.
about Silicon Valley indeed, down the peninsula and to San Jose. There's no question. I
Right.
think about places like Seattle. I think about New York and Manhattan. I think about Chicago. I think about certain parts of Florida as well. There's these really hyper, like it's kind of like the major leagues, and you've kind of had the insight to the major league as it all has unfolded over that period of time.
Right.
Um, what do you think is like there's obviously certain things that are different in the Bay Area in the sense that your market, you do all reports, disclosures, everything up front. You're the only market in North America that does that as a standardization and have been doing that for the last, how long has that been?
Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. It's been many, many years. And the nice part about that is that you can truly do an as is sale,
Mm,
right? So if you're providing all of those inspections up front, you're comfortable moving a buyer forward as is and without contingencies. And so many of our sales are non contingent. And in order to be non contingent, you really have to have all the information on the property
yeah.
up front.
I wanted to talk about also when you're dealing with, like, you've dealt with buyer fatigue probably more than anyone, in the sense that I know, for an example, when I first came into the Bay Area offering auction, one of the things that I loved was the full disclosure up front, because we required that regardless of anywhere you do auction in North America, you have to do that full disclosure,
Hmm.
and you all the reports. But the one thing that I noticed when we came into the Bay Area, there was obviously a little bit of resistance to what we do. There always is, like, oh, we already kind of run an auction, but then when we can prove that we get them more money or we can provoke a situation or whatever it is, people are very open to it. But I saw the buyers and the agents be very open to it, or the buyers' agents be open to it, because there was so much fatigue in the sense that the buyers were used to competing against, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 offers and losing out. And the agent would be like, oh, I'm sorry, this is the second one you've lost out on, and all of a sudden it starts to reflect poorly on them. How do you manage a buyer's relationship when you're missing out? Or is that just, do you do anything, or is that something that you're just used to?
Well, I think, you have to be honest and give them the information that you know, right? First, you're going to guide them where you think it probably will sell. And I think you stay in contact with the listing agent, get as much information as possible to give all the information to them. So I've had buyers where I'll say, this is where I think it's going to sell, it's in this range. But as a buyer, you're going to ultimately make your own decision on where you want to, be price wise. And a lot of times it does sell right in that range of where I'm talking about, but they may not be comfortable going there. And then after the fact, of course, they're going to compare everything to that. But
Mm.
I get as much information as I can from the listing agent. I stay in contact as we're going through the process, and if we have an opportunity to change the offer, I always look for that so that I can go back to my buyers and hopefully get their offer changed if they can do it,
Yeah,
and just try to really develop really good working relationships with the listing agent so that they want to work with you, right?
yeah.
Because there's lots of agents out there that don't do their homework. And if you are a good agent, you generally can tell who the other good agents are.
Well, let's segue into being a good agent for a moment, because there's one thing that I really enjoyed working with you here. Like, we're going to talk about a property that you had in at Curtis,
Hmm.
as we affectionately know it, Curtis.
Right.
I would say that this was a really successful outcome through our auction process. I'd
Hmm.
also say that working with you was one of the better experiences that I've had when it comes to working with a great deal of other agents. Usually they rely on us from being the auction team to do all the follow up and the feedback and all that type of stuff. You were on it. You were following up all the time with these people. You were obviously trying to paint a very clear picture for your sellers. But let's just paint a quick little picture of where this all was. Curtis, the listing itself was on the marketplace as a traditional listing. It had
Right.
been on originally, and then it had come off, and then it come back on. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we went on for a very short time, came off, and then when we were back on the market, we were back on for about 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
We had very limited showings. It was owner occupied, and so it was tough to sometimes accommodate showings, or even tough to do open houses. And so when we were able to show, or we did have open houses, we did have very good feedback and interest. We were sending out disclosure packages, but with some of the changes in the market, and that being higher end for Willow Glen, it was a little tougher to get buyers to come forward.
Yeah.
And so it just sat, and I could continue to follow up with the agents that were requesting the packages. I would invite them back to open houses or for another showing. And we just had a lot of interested parties just sitting on the sideline.
Now, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. When I reached out to you on an email, because that was our first introduction to all of
Mhm.
this, you'd had a little bit of exposure to us previously from just Shannon. I think a couple. You said that you'd seen a few of the auctions. I think it was, or
Well,
something along.
I had gotten some emails, and
Mhm.
I kind of like checked you guys out, and I thought, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And then of course when you reached out specifically on that listing, I thought, maybe this could be a really good tool for us.
Now,
So,
so let's talk through that. Like if we're being, let's be brutally honest here for a moment, because there's
sure.
probably some other thoughts that go through people's minds when we reach out to them. Because I often find that people are either very open minded like yourself and are trying to get the best outcome for their client, think, hey, I'm
Mhm.
going to use all the tools that are at my disposal in order to get them the outcome they need. That was very much your view. But a
Absolutely.
lot of the agents get upset when we're basically calling them out saying, you haven't sold your house yet. Can we help you?
Right.
And a lot of people get upset with us about that, and it feels funny. Why do you think that is?
I think they feel like like they're failing, right? That they haven't sold it, and we don't want our sellers to think that we're failures and that we can't do this, right? But I think if you take the approach that I did and say, hey, I want you to have an open mind. This is another tool in my toolbox, right? And and in the end, it worked out great. I mean, they were concerned, right? But I think that for me, thinking about it really strongly when you called or when you first emailed me, was that we were having very limited showings and time for people, and again, people sitting on the sideline, and we would get so excited about a buyer coming through that seemed so interested and wanted the disclosures, and then all of a sudden wouldn't move forward. And I'm
Mm,
like, where did our buyer go? Like, this is the right buyer for the house, right?
mm,
And so I just thought, what is it? Like, we had done two price reductions. They weren't large, but they were two price reductions. And I thought we could continue to do small price reductions and stay on the market longer. We could go off the market for 30 days and then try to reset, or we could do something, like the auction.
yeah,
And so I just, sat down with my clients, because we knew that we were going to get to the point where it was either we were going to do something, whether it was going to be another price reduction or the auction, but we were going to go off the market. And that was, as you know, we even did the auction a shorter span
yeah,
than you guys normally do,
yeah,
because we were limited on vacation times and them going out of town. And so it was like, okay, once this date hits, we're going to go off the market, and then we'll decide when we'll go back on the market. It could be 6 months. So,
yeah.
and I just didn't want them to go through that. Like, one of the things that they said is, even when we had limited showings where we had a period of time where we wouldn't be able to show it, I'm like, do you want to go off the market? Because then it would reset. And Adam was just like, no, because people could see that, right? On and off, on and off. And, how does that look? So he said, no, let's just leave it on.
Yeah. I want to talk about the conversation that you had with the sellers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that when you first brought the concept up, can I ask about that initial conversation? Because a lot of agents have butterflies in their stomachs when it comes to, having that conversation with their sellers. Hey, I'm suggesting something
Right.
new. They might even say, well, why didn't you bring this to me in the very beginning? All of those different things. Can we talk about the different things that ultimately that you might have like went through in that conversation, or the thought process that you went into that conversation with?
So I brought it up with them when we looked at what their options were going to be. We knew that we were limited on time. And so we talked about, do we do another price reduction, which could be a larger price reduction? Do we just take it off the market? Do we look outside the box? And so I just asked them to have an open mind and consider outside the box and how this could work. And of course, I had a whole list of things that you and I had discussed on all the positives. So I went through all of those. And so in the beginning, they were, a little cautious, and they just said, it just seems kind of desperate. Like that was their first reaction. Like, we're just not sure when you say auction, it just seems like, you know, it's falling apart. Like, they have to sell type thing. And so they weren't sure how they felt about it. I said, take a couple of days and talk about it. And then let's talk again and then set up a conference call with Ben. And so they said, okay. And we had a showing at their house. And so afterwards, I stayed after the showing, and we were talking. And Adam said, oh, I think we'd be open to the auction. And I said, oh, great. So they just thought about it. And I think they, again, thought outside the box. This could be a good tool.
Yep.
And then we set up the conference call. And I think overall that conference call went well.
I was in Australia at the time. I remember.
That's right. You were. Yeah. So it was a good conference call, and they were all in.
I think that Jerylann, the thing that I think a lot of agents think is that it's a long drawn out process to get people to agree to auction. Now, I think you've gone about it in the right way, in the sense that you've given them options and you've given them different tools and you've let them think on it. But as soon as they actually hear it from the auction team perspective, and we take them through the details and stuff along those lines, I'd say as far as that, 95% of the time a seller will say yes, because it's so logical, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, our fee being 0.5%, it's so much less than what the price reduction probably were going to have to do anyway to provoke the interest.
Exactly. And the thing is, and you know how I feel about that, right? I had no problem giving up that part of the commission. I felt like it wasn't fair to go back to the client and ask the client to pay for it. It's a tool that I'm offering them and bringing you guys in. And I had absolutely no problem paying it out of our commission.
Yeah, no, and I hope that people hear that, because something is better than nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the bottom line is getting it done for the client sooner, right? So that we can get it done. And in the end, everybody is happy, they're closed, and they can move on, versus sitting around wondering what's going to happen in the market, staying off the market, and then saying, oh, well, should I stay off for 3 months? Should I stay off for 6 months? Should I wait to go on until next year? So, and it just confuses them. So I think overall, it was a great experience for them. They were very, very happy with the experience. As you know, when I told you how happy they were with you, and said they would write, give you a testimonial, whatever.
Yeah. They were fantastic with it. The thing I do want to dive into, though, once we went live on the market, one of the things that we do is that we reach out to everybody that was previously interested. And the funny part about that is that one of the people that had been really messing you around, I would say, Jerylann, and again, we're not going to name names or do anything like that, but realistically, they were certainly giving you the runaround. They'd shown some interest and they hadn't shown some interest. The interesting part, yes, we got some new interest in the property as soon as we went as an auction. There were some new people that came in, some new blood, some more showing, some just different stuff. But the old people that had been sitting on the fence, man, did it make them move, didn't it?
It did. And I was amazed at how quick people came forward and how many people had already seen the property, either, as a showing or at an open house, and they were back. And it was like, great.
Yeah. And now the experience with the negotiation, that was an interesting thing that I want to just touch on quickly, is that they originally made an offer. They originally made an offer of, I would say, at the beginning, it was a lower offer. We won't go into the depth of those numbers, but
Right.
realistically, they made the offer and they basically were like, take it or leave it. We're not going to come to auction. And when I spoke to you about that, and I said, hey, just I want to be clear on something. This always happens. They
Mhm.
will walk away and they'll pretend they're not interested. And we just went silent. We went dark at that point, and then we waited until we got closer to auction day at that point, and then they come running back in to try and get it before the auction actually occurred. And that
Right.
was really the characteristic of how it happens every single time. Our bidding to start from was $2.8 million on the property. We ended up closing for $3,305,000. And realistically, I think that that was their original offer was below $3 million. To get them all the way to $3,305,000, I think, was a tremendous effort, but it was probably down to the leverage that it created, this anonymity of auction date that was approaching. That was one of the real things that you and I certainly worked
Right.
together on, because they originally had finance contingencies and then they removed those to get to stop the auction.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, with the agents, the ones that did have interested buyers, they wanted to stop the auction because they were all like a little afraid of going to auction, right? It's
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
my buyer doesn't want to go to auction. And okay, then come in with an offer to stop the auction, right? And they're used to traditional, counter offers and, negotiating that way, right? And that's not how the auction works. And so that was
Correct.
hard for some of them to really understand. In the end, it worked great for us, and everybody's happy.
I think that the thing that was interesting, though, because we had several people talking or verbalizing offers before the auction, and
Right.
some of those were lower than the 3,305,000 that it sold for. I think
Mhm.
that really helped Adam, helped the sellers in total. I believe, like, really come to the conclusion that, hey, this is probably the best one, because they were head and shoulders above where other people were. And that's the benefit of auction, is that we get the chance to make a decision before the auction day, versus taking it all the way through to auction. But that fear of auction day is perfect in the sense of getting things to happen beforehand so that we can paint a
Right.
clear picture.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
you would think sometimes, that with the auction like yours, you get to see what those people are bidding, right? So when it goes to auction versus when you are in a multiple offer situation and you don't know what people are bidding. So you would think it would be a little bit more, uh, that the buyers might say, okay, well, I'll just wait,
Yeah.
right? But really, they didn't want to wait. They wanted to come in and see if they could secure it. So
Well, that's the if we're on the other side of things, Jerylann, and you're representing a buyer, that is the ultimate negotiation strategy for auction. Happy to share it with
yeah,
people. Is just say to them, I'm happy to go to auction, because you should go to auction, because you see what the others are bidding and all of those things. But I will say this, is that you will pay more on average on auction day. If we've got competitive bidding, we'll get between 8 and 12% more, and that's just the nature of the way that the competitive nature of people is. But that said, is that so many people are afraid of it that it gives us the best of both worlds. We get to put
right.
people in transparent competition versus the other, but you got to see it all. But the one thing I want to make sure of that people understand, I would go as far as to say, Jerylann, that auction was way more work than traditional. Wouldn't you say?
That it's a lot more work than traditional. Oh yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes,
The explanation of you having to explain it to people, the follow up of explaining it to people, the conversations with the sellers, me calling you all the time and us
yeah,
communicating all the time. I think that it's fair enough to say it got a result, but yes, you're working a little bit harder in a condensed period of time for it to happen. There's no doubt about that.
right, right. And
Yeah.
I think because it's not widely used here yet, that people don't understand it. I had agents saying, "Oh, so is the seller late on their mortgage?" And I'm like, "No.
Mhm.
Have you read what we have on MLS? This is a luxury, non-distressed auction." Well, are you sure? And I'm like, please go to MLS and read. Please go onto the website. And people, they just think all these different things, right?
Yeah.
When they don't really read everything. So it I think it's a great tool. I got calls from other agents after the fact, but asking about it, which I highly
You
recommend.
even gave me a referral straight away. They put that property in escrow, by the way, before I got
I
to speak to
did.
them.
Yeah, I saw that. But yeah, and they even went on and, even after we were closed and looked at our stuff on the auction. And so, I mean, I think that it's a very good tool for people to have, but agents are still very, they just don't know enough about it. So they do need a lot of hand holding. We need to explain things to them. We need to, basically tell them, as we told several agents, like, we're not trying to not tell you, give you a number. We're just telling you that the number that you're giving us won't stop the auction. So,
Exactly right. Exactly
give us
right.
another number, right?
Now,
And they're
and
like,
that's
no,
Jerylann, the thing that I respected about this whole process, though, too too often, like, we have to justify what we're doing to the
mhm,
agent, the listing agent, so much. Don't get me wrong, I had to still explain it to you because you're not a silly person. Things had to be explained to you, so you're like, oh, well, that makes sense then. How we negotiated that. But too often people are so resistant to not countering people or whatever. But let's face it, if we countered those people, we probably would have lost them because it would have been too high a counter or whatever it is. We
right,
just allowed the negotiation to take its term. Say, we're not saying no, we're saying no right now. If you
right,
want to stop the auction, just increase your offer. Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. And then, they want to fight. Oh, we don't do business this way and all that. But in the end, it all, again, worked out. And I think we absolutely got the right buyer.
That's right. Well, hey, as we conclude the podcast, I wanted to say thank you so much for you giving us the opportunity. I look forward to doing another auction with you in the near future, hopefully. But either way, appreciate you being under the weather and still willing to chat through us with us today. So again, really
Yeah.
appreciated working with you.
Thank you. Appreciate everything that you did to get this done for us as well. Thanks so
Thanks,
much,
Gerald.
Ben.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.